Michael Harrison stood in the doorway of his Manhattan home, expecting Professor Lawrence from Juilliard. Instead, he found Maggie Collins with her worn instrument case, his brow furrowed at this obvious scheduling error. Before he could dismiss her, Emma, his 7-year-old daughter, appeared. "Are you my piano teacher?" she asked, eyes brightening at Maggie's gentle smile. "There's been a mistake," Michael began. But Emma had already taken Maggie's hand. "Will you teach me, please?" Emma's voice carried hope that had been absent for months. Michael hesitated, then conceded. "One lesson. Just today." The penthouse apartment revealed everything about Michael Harrison's life: minimalist luxury, expensive art, and the emotional vacuum left by his wife's death 3 years ago. At 39, he matched his business magazine portrayals. Imposing, successful, and carefully controlled. As CEO of Harrison Innovations, he'd built an empire but struggled to connect with his daughter since Claire's death. Emma sat at the grand piano, an instrument that looked barely played. Her perfect posture and vacant eyes showed a child merely going through the motions of life. "Do you like music, Emma?" Maggie asked gently. "My mom did," Emma replied, touching a key without pressing it. From his office doorway, Michael observed the lesson while pretending to review documents. His assistant's error had brought this unsuitable replacement for the renowned professor he'd researched. At 28, Maggie was unlike previous instructors. Her messy auburn bun and practical clothing contrasted with the Harrison home's sterile perfection. Though unmarried, she spoke to Emma with an understanding that suggested personal experience with children. "This piano has been waiting for someone to tell it stories," Maggie said softly. "Pianos can't hear stories," Emma replied, though curiosity colored her voice. "Every time you press a key, you're telling part of your story," Maggie demonstrated with a gentle melody. "That's hello in piano language." Emma hesitantly pressed a key, producing a clear note. "Now you've introduced yourself," Maggie smiled. Michael retreated into his office, disturbed by what he'd seen. Previous teachers had used structured methods he'd approved: theory books, flashcards, rigid finger exercises. None had evoked the small smile now appearing on his daughter's face. What Michael couldn't know was that Maggie's approach came from personal experience. At home waited her 6-year-old son Tyler, another child navigating life after loss. Tyler's father had died when he was 3, leaving Maggie to rebuild their world through music. As the lesson ended, Maggie gathered her belongings. "You did wonderfully, Emma. Practice isn't about perfection. It's about telling your story better each time." Emma nodded, then suddenly hugged Maggie around the waist. Michael, returning to dismiss Maggie, froze. Emma hadn't hugged anyone voluntarily since her mother's funeral. Maggie had arrived completely confused. The call had come 2 days earlier. An efficient voice explaining that Mr. Harrison needed a piano teacher for his daughter. Assuming she'd been recommended by existing clients, Maggie had rearranged her schedule and secured extra childcare. A client like Michael Harrison could mean financial stability she desperately needed. Now, standing in the marble foyer with Emma's hand in hers, Maggie realized something had gone terribly wrong. Michael's expression had made that abundantly clear. "Mr. Harrison, I think there's been some confusion about the appointment." "Yes. My assistant was supposed to confirm with Professor Lawrence from Juilliard." His tone made the perceived downgrade obvious. Emma tugged Maggie toward the grand piano. "Dad never lets me touch it much. He says it's special. Special things should be shared, not just looked at." Maggie replied gently, "Miss." Michael began from the doorway. "Collins. Maggie Collins. Miss Collins, I appreciate you coming, but there's been a mistake. I'll have my assistant reschedule with the proper instructor." Emma's face fell instantly, her brief animation vanishing. Maggie felt the girl's hand tighten. "Perhaps since I'm already here, we could do one lesson? No obligation beyond today." Michael checked his watch, a dismissal Maggie recognized from wealthy clients who viewed her as a service provider rather than a professional. "Please, Dad?" Emma's small voice barely carried across the room. Just today? Something in her plea reached him. Fine. 1 hour. I'll be in my office. Rather than opening a theory book, Maggie invited Emma to sit beside her on the bench. Before we play anything, let's just listen, she suggested. Listen to what? Nobody's playing. To the piano itself. Every piano has its own voice, even when quiet. They sat in silence as sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes above the polished instrument. Now, let's hear one note. Maggie pressed middle C, letting it resonate. That's the piano saying hello. Would you like to answer? Emma hesitantly pressed another key, looking surprised at the clear tone. Beautiful. Now let's have a conversation with these notes. For the next hour, Maggie taught Emma to listen and feel music rather than mechanically play it. By the end, Emma was creating simple melodies by ear, her face alive with concentration. When Michael returned, he was startled to find Emma eagerly learning how different emotions could be expressed through the same sequence of notes. That's angry. Emma identified as Maggie played staccato and forte. And this? Maggie played the same pattern softly, with lingering touches. Sad, but maybe a little hopeful too? Exactly right. You have excellent emotional hearing. Time's up, Michael announced from the doorway. As they walked to the door, Emma suddenly hugged Maggie. Will you come back tomorrow? Before Maggie could answer, Michael intervened. We'll be in touch. Miss Collins. Thank you. But as he closed the door, his daughter's rare smile lingered in his mind, creating the first crack in his certainty about what Emma needed. 3 weeks later, Maggie had become a fixture at the Harrison home, arriving every Tuesday and Thursday. Michael had yielded to Emma's pleading, but set strict conditions. After thoroughly researching Maggie, discovering her incomplete music degree, modest therapy practice, and widowed status, he'd provided a structured curriculum. Emma needs proper fundamentals, he'd explained tersely. Technical proficiency first, creativity later. Maggie had accepted these terms. The job paid triple her usual rate, and with Tyler starting school, every dollar mattered. Initially, Michael worked from home during lessons, office door ajar. He observed how Maggie incorporated required exercises while making them engaging. Despite himself, he noticed Emma practicing voluntarily between sessions, unprecedented progress. One Thursday, Michael returned home unexpectedly during Emma's lesson. His downtown meeting had been canceled, and he decided to work from home. Stepping into the foyer, he heard unfamiliar music. Not the exercises or Bach pieces he'd approved. The melody was contemporary yet complex, with emotional depth that stopped him mid-stride. Moving quietly, he observed Emma beside Maggie. Small hands mimicking the teacher's movements. Feel how it builds here. Like the music is taking a deep breath before the next phrase, Maggie encouraged. The piece was hauntingly familiar until recognition hit him like a physical blow. It was Claire's music, composed during her brief career. Music he'd archived but couldn't bear to hear played. What do you think you're doing? His voice cut through the melody, sharp and cold. Both startled, the music stopping abruptly. Emma's hands flew from the keys. Dad, you're home early, she said, joy transforming into anxiety. Emma found the sheet music in the bench, Maggie explained calmly despite Michael's thunderous expression. She wanted to learn it. That music is not part of the curriculum. Emma, please go to your room. But Dad, now. Emma. After Emma disappeared down the hallway, Michael turned to Maggie. You had no right. Those compositions are personal family matters, not teaching material. Maggie gathered her belongings with deliberate calm. Emma told me her mother wrote that piece. She said it was her favorite. What goes on in this family is not your concern. Your job is to teach, according to the method I've outlined, nothing more. With respect, Mr. Harrison, my job is to teach Emma to love music. That can't happen if we lock away pieces that mean something to her. I didn't hire you for your philosophy on music education. No. Maggie replied, shouldering her bag. You hired me because for the first time since losing her mother, your daughter connected with someone through music. But you're so afraid of that connection that you'd rather she learn mechanical exercises with no heart. I think it's time for you to leave, Miss Collins. I'll have my assistant call about future lessons. Maggie paused at the door. Emma deserves to keep her mother's memory alive through music. Don't take that away because it's painful for you. That evening, Emma barely touched her dinner, pushing pasta listlessly around her plate. The Thompsons have recommended another instructor, Michael said. Mrs. Abernathy. She's taught at the conservatory for 30 years. Emma set down her fork. I don't want another teacher. I want Miss Maggie. Emma, what happened today was inappropriate. Miss Collins disregarded our agreed curriculum. Mom would have liked her, Emma said quietly, the simple observation landing like a grenade between them. Later, after tucking Emma in, Michael stood before the piano, examining Claire's compositions that Emma had discovered. His fingers traced the handwritten notations, each a painful reminder of what they'd lost. The next morning, Michael's assistant reported that Emma had asked her driver to take her to an address in Queens after school. Recognizing Maggie's address, the driver had called for instructions. Bring her home, Michael ordered, already reaching for his coat. By the time he navigated rush-hour traffic, Emma was already at Maggie's modest apartment, working through Claire's composition with determined concentration. The small two-bedroom in Queens was worlds away from the Harrison penthouse. Where Michael's home was sleek minimalism, Maggie's space was warm and lived in, mismatched furniture, children's artwork, and family photos everywhere. It was a home where coffee mugs didn't match, and books filled every available surface. As Emma played, she suddenly pressed her hand to her forehead. Emma? What's wrong? Maggie moved quickly to her side. I feel funny, Emma murmured. Cheeks flushed. My head hurts. You're running a fever, sweetie. Let's get you lying down. Maggie had just settled Emma on the sofa with a cool cloth when a sharp knock came at the door. Tyler, who had been drawing quietly, looked up with wide eyes. It's okay, Maggie assured him, though her stomach nodded as she opened the door to find Michael Harrison filling her narrow hallway, his bespoke suit incongruous against the building's worn carpet. Where is she? He demanded, then stopped at the sight of Emma, curled beneath a patchwork quilt. She has a fever, Maggie explained. It came on suddenly during her lesson. Michael's anger receded as he knelt beside his daughter. Emma? How are you feeling, sweetheart? Dad? Emma blinked groggily. I don't feel good. But I was playing Mom's song really well before. I'm sure you were, he said softly, stroking her hair. We should get you home. Could we stay? Emma asked, clutching his hand. Miss Maggie makes good soup when you're sick. Like Mom did. Before Michael could respond, thunder rumbled and rain began lashing the windows. Looks like a storm's moving in, Maggie observed. Maybe it would be better not to move her right away. The skies opened completely as Emma drifted back to sleep. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I suppose we could wait it out. Dad? A small voice came from the kitchen doorway. Tyler. This is Mr. Harrison. Emma's dad. Maggie introduced them. And Mr. Harrison. This is my son, Tyler. You have a big car, Tyler observed. I saw it from the window. A ghost of a smile touched Michael's lips. Yes. I suppose I do. As the evening progressed and the storm continued, Maggie set up a makeshift bed for both children in Tyler's room. She'll be more comfortable there than on the sofa, Maggie explained, returning to the living room. And I put fresh sheets on my bed for you. I'll take the couch, he replied immediately. It's too short for you. You'd be miserable. I've slept in worse conditions. Maggie sighed and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 mugs of tea. She settled into the armchair opposite the sofa, tucking her feet beneath her. The silence between them was heavy until Michael spoke. Emma hasn't asked for soup when she's sick since Claire died. I didn't know she remembered that tradition. Children remember more than we give them credit for. They just don't always have words for it. How old is your son? Michael asked, glancing at a photo showing a younger Tyler with a dark-haired man. 6, almost 7. And his father? Maggie's fingers tightened around her mug. David died 3 years ago. Heart condition no one knew about. He was 32. The simple statement hung between them, devoid of emotional flourish, yet resonating with a depth of feeling Michael recognized intimately. I'm sorry, he said, words inadequate but sincere. Tyler was too young to really understand, but he feels the absence, even without specific memories. Like Emma with her mother's music, Michael said quietly, the parallel finally dawning on him. Exactly like that. Maggie set down her mug. I was in my last year at the conservatory when it happened. Afterward, there wasn't time or money to finish. Life shifted priorities. Michael studied her across the dim living room, seeing for the first time not just the piano teacher he'd reluctantly hired, but a woman who had navigated the same treacherous waters of grief and single parenthood that had nearly drowned him despite his resources. Claire would have liked you, he admitted, unconsciously echoing Emma's words. I would have liked to know her from how Emma talks about her. They lapsed into silence again, but it was different now. Not tense, but contemplative. As rain continued its steady rhythm, Michael found himself truly listening, perhaps for the first time since Claire's death, to another person's parallel journey through loss. 3 months later, tension between Maggie and Michael had eased into cautious professional respect. Emma's lessons continued twice weekly, now with a curriculum balancing technical training with emotional connection. The girl was flourishing, her progress remarkable even to Michael's critical eye. Then came Michael's unexpected invitation. His company's annual charity gala was approaching, a prestigious event benefiting arts education in underserved communities. We need a performer for the cocktail hour, he explained during one of Emma's lessons. Our usual pianist canceled. Would you be interested? Maggie looked up surprised. Me? Surely you know people from Juilliard or the Philharmonic. Emma suggested you, Michael admitted. She's quite insistent that you're the best pianist she knows. There was more he wouldn't say aloud. He'd heard Maggie playing after Emma's lessons when she thought the apartment was empty. The depth in her playing had stopped him in his tracks more than once. The night of the gala, Maggie arrived at the Plaza Hotel, feeling out of place. Her black dress, the nicest she owned, had been purchased for David's funeral and altered to be less somber. It was elegant but simple compared to the designer gowns surrounding her. The Steinway Grand positioned in the ballroom's corner was a familiar model. Maggie ran her fingers lightly over the keys before beginning a program of classical pieces with subtle jazz arrangements. As she played, Michael moved through the crowd, engaging in the social currency of influence. Emma sat nearby, uncomfortable in her frilly dress but beaming with pride whenever anyone complimented Maggie. During a brief break, Maggie overheard a nearby conversation that immediately soured her evening. Is that the piano teacher Harrison hired for his daughter? A woman in diamonds asked, not bothering to lower her voice. Apparently so, her companion replied. Looks more like a nanny than a concert pianist. Doesn't she? Well, you know how it is with these widowers. A third voice added knowingly. They hire for companionship as much as skill. Laughter rippled through the group, stopping only when they realized Michael was standing nearby, his face impassive but shoulders rigid. Emma, having wandered to her father, clutched his hand and looked up expectantly, waiting for him to defend her beloved teacher. But Michael merely nodded politely before steering Emma away, saying nothing to acknowledge the slight. The rest of the evening stretched interminably. Maggie finished her set professionally, but the joy had vanished from her playing. When the orchestra took over, she slipped away, collected her coat, and headed for the exit. Miss Maggie, wait! Emma called, running after her. Aren't you staying for dinner? Dad reserved a seat for you at our table. I think it's better if I go home, Emma, Maggie said gently. Tyler's babysitter needs to get back. But, it's okay, sweetheart. I'll see you Tuesday. Emma's face clouded with disappointment that transformed into something harder. the mask she wore when protecting herself from hurt. "You played beautifully tonight," she said formally, suddenly sounding much older than 7. "Thank you, Emma." Maggie squeezed her hand before leaving. The following Tuesday, the atmosphere during Emma's lesson was subdued. She played mechanically, missing notes she'd mastered weeks ago. When Maggie gently asked what was wrong, Emma remained silent before finally speaking. "Why didn't Dad say anything when those ladies were mean about you?" The question caught Maggie off guard. "I don't know, Emma. Sometimes adults don't know what to say in difficult situations." "He always knows what to say," Emma countered, her faith in her father visibly wavering. "But he just stood there. He didn't tell them you're the best teacher ever." He didn't say anything. Before Maggie could respond, Michael arrived home. Emma immediately closed her music book and slid from the bench. "I have homework," she announced, not meeting her father's eyes as she left. Michael's confused gaze followed his daughter before turning to Maggie. "Is something wrong?" "Emma's upset about what happened at the gala," Maggie explained. "About those comments, and that you didn't respond." Michael's expression shuddered. "Office politics are complicated. Those women are married to board members and major investors." "I understand," Maggie replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. "But Emma doesn't see politics. She sees that someone insulted a person she cares about. And her father, her hero, said nothing." "I pay you very well," Michael began defensively, then stopped at the flash of hurt that crossed Maggie's face. "Yes, you do," she agreed, gathering her things. "But Emma's trust isn't in our contract, and right now, she's questioning whether the adults in her life will stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." The following Saturday morning, Michael found himself outside Maggie's apartment building. The week had been difficult. Emma remained cool toward him, and his attempts to explain adult relationships had fallen flat against her 7-year-old sense of justice. He knocked, prepared for an awkward conversation. Instead, the door swung open to reveal Tyler, his face brightening with recognition. "Hi, Emma's dad. Emma isn't here." "I know," Michael replied with a small smile. "I came to talk to your mom." Tyler nodded seriously and stepped back. As Michael entered, he noticed the boy had been seated at a keyboard. Sheet music spread before him. "Are you practicing?" Michael asked. "Yep. Mom's teaching me the song she wrote." Tyler demonstrated proudly, playing the same melody Michael had heard Emma playing. The piece that had triggered his anger, because it reminded him of Claire. Michael listened with growing confusion. "Your mom wrote this song?" "Uh-huh," Tyler nodded, continuing to play. "She wrote lots of songs. This one's my favorite. It's beautiful," Michael acknowledged, his world tilting slightly. "Your mom taught it to Emma, too," Tyler beamed. "Mom says good music should be shared." He played a difficult sequence effortlessly. "She was gonna play with the big orchestra, but then my dad died, and we had to move, and she had to work at the coffee shop instead." Michael was still processing this when Maggie emerged, hair damp from the shower, stopping short at the sight of him. "Mr. Harrison, I wasn't expecting you." "I came to apologize," Michael began, then gestured to the keyboard. "But I'm confused. Tyler says you wrote the piece he's playing." Maggie's expression grew guarded. "Yes, I did. Years ago. But it's so similar to my wife's composition, the one Emma found." Maggie smiled sadly. "It's not similar to your wife's piece, Mr. Harrison. It is your wife's piece." Michael stared, uncomprehending. "Claire Harrison submitted that composition to the Young Composers Fellowship at the Manhattan School of Music 15 years ago," Maggie explained gently. "I was on the student committee that reviewed applications. Her work was extraordinary. I memorized it. Later adapted it for teaching. I never expected to encounter it again. Certainly not in your home." Michael sank onto the sofa, the revelation washing over him. "The fellowship she won right before we met. She was so proud of that. She should have been, Maggie agreed, sitting across from him. The committee was unanimous. And you? Tyler mentioned an orchestra. Maggie looked away uncomfortably. It was nothing. Mom was going to play with the National Symphony, Tyler interjected proudly. But then Dad got sick, and she stayed to take care of us instead. Michael's gaze snapped back to Maggie, who was silently signaling her son to stop talking. Is that true? He asked quietly. Maggie sighed. Yes. I was offered a position with the National Symphony Orchestra, but David was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy around the same time. The treatments required us to stay in New York. By the time he passed, the position was filled, and I had a 4-year-old to support alone. Michael was speechless. All this time, he'd been condescending to a woman who had made the same choice he struggled with, putting family before career, love before ambition. The woman he'd dismissed as merely adequate was exceptional in every way that truly mattered. You don't need to look at me like that, Maggie said, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. It wasn't some noble sacrifice. It was just life. No, Michael said firmly. It was a choice. One many people wouldn't have made. Tyler, bored with the adult conversation, returned to the keyboard, picking out Claire's melody with childish determination. He plays just like Emma, Michael observed. They both have natural emotional expression, Maggie agreed. Technical skill can be taught, but that instinct is innate. Michael sat, listening to Tyler play, seeing Maggie in a completely new light. Finally, he spoke the words that had been forming since he'd overheard those cruel comments at the gala. You don't have to prove anything to me or anyone else, he said softly. I see you now. I'm sorry it took me so long. 2 weeks later, Michael's town car pulled up outside Maggie's apartment. This time, neither Tyler nor Maggie was surprised. What had begun as Michael's gesture of apology, inviting them to dinner at his home, had evolved into a Sunday evening ritual. No exclusive restaurants, no formal attire or social pretenses, just a simple meal, sometimes cooked by Michael's housekeeper, sometimes takeout from favorite places, the kind of comfortable family dinner Michael hadn't experienced since Claire's death. Tonight, Emma and Tyler sat at the piano, working through a duet they'd been practicing. Their small heads bent in concentration, occasional giggles erupting. When one made a mistake, again from the top, Emma directed seriously. And remember, the left hand needs to be softer here. Michael and Maggie watched from the doorway, sharing a smile at Emma's authoritative tone. So different from the withdrawn child of months ago. She's bossier than you are, Michael observed quietly. She comes by it honestly, Maggie returned with a pointed look. They moved to the kitchen where Michael poured wine. The formality that had once characterized their interactions had eroded. Replaced by easy companionship neither had anticipated. Tyler's reading has improved dramatically, Maggie mentioned. His teacher says he's almost at grade level now. Emma mentioned you've been working with him after school. Thank you for that. It's nothing. Emma helps too. They quiz each other on sight words. From the living room came childish laughter, followed by a surprisingly harmonious rendition of the duet. Michael and Maggie returned to the doorway, drawn by the music, and Emma's rare, unrestrained joy. When the piece concluded, both children looked up expectantly, beaming at the adults' applause. Can we have ice cream now? Tyler asked hopefully. After dinner, Maggie and Michael replied in unison, then exchanged amused glances. As the children raced to wash hands, Michael and Maggie stepped onto the terrace. The spring evening was mild. The city spread before them in a tapestry of lights. They stood side by side, comfortable in a shared silence that would have been unimaginable months earlier. I've been thinking, Maggie said eventually, about starting a small music program for children who've experienced loss. Michael turned to her, interested. Like music therapy? Similar, but more focused on expression than traditional therapy. A place where kids like Emma and Tyler could connect with music to process grief. Nothing formal, just a safe space to play, compose, express. That sounds remarkable, Michael said sincerely. Would you need space? Instruments? Maggie shrugged. It's just an idea right now. Something I've been considering since seeing how music has helped Emma reconnect with memories of Claire. And Tyler with his father? Yes. Maggie's gaze was distant, thoughtful. Music gives them language for feelings they can't articulate yet. I think other children could benefit from that too. Michael nodded, watching her profile against the cityscape. In the months since their first mistaken meeting, he'd seen beyond her practical exterior to the depth of understanding that made her an effective teacher. Not just musical talent, but profound empathy. Inside, the children called that dinner was ready. As they turned to go in, Michael realized with sudden clarity that for the first time in 3 years, his penthouse felt like a home again, filled with music, laughter, and the gentle presence of a woman who asked nothing of him but honesty. No declarations had been made between them. No boundaries crossed beyond friendship and mutual respect. But something was growing in the spaces between their shared responsibilities, something neither was ready to name, but both had begun to treasure. 2 weeks later, Michael sat in his corner office, unable to focus on quarterly reports. His mind kept returning to Maggie's idea. A music program for grieving children. The concept had expanded in his mind beyond her modest vision. When his assistant announced Maggie's arrival for their scheduled meeting, he rose eagerly. He'd invited her to discuss an idea, deliberately vague about details. "Thank you for coming," he greeted her, noting how different she looked in his corporate environment. Still simply dressed, but carrying herself with quiet confidence. "Your message sounded important," she replied. "Is everything okay with Emma's lessons?" "Everything's fine. Excellent, actually." He sat across from her, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I wanted to discuss your music program idea for children experiencing loss." Maggie nodded, cautiously interested. "I've been thinking about it extensively," Michael continued. "What if, instead of a small program, we created something larger? A dedicated center with multiple instructors, proper facilities, open to any child, regardless of financial means." Maggie's eyes widened. "That would be incredible. But also expensive and complicated. The Harrison Foundation could fund it," Michael said simply. "We're always looking for meaningful initiatives. This would be personal." "Michael," Maggie began, using his first name naturally after months of gradual informality. "It's a wonderful thought, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to lead something like that. I never finished my degree. I don't have credentials in music therapy or—" "You have something more valuable," Michael interrupted gently. "You understand both the music and the grief. You've lived it." He slid a folder across the desk, containing preliminary sketches of a converted warehouse, floor plans showing music rooms, a small performance area, offices. "I've already had my team looking at potential locations," he explained as Maggie flipped through the pages. "We could call it Harmony and Hope. A place where children like Emma and Tyler can find their voices again." Maggie closed the folder, pushing it back toward him with visible reluctance. "It's a beautiful vision. But I'm just a piano teacher who couldn't even finish conservatory. This needs someone with credentials, experience running programs." "That can be hired," Michael countered. "What can't be hired is the heart of it. Someone who truly understands what these children need. Someone like you." Maggie stood, moving to the window to gather her thoughts. "I appreciate your faith in me, but this is overwhelming." "Take some time," Michael offered. "There's no rush." Maggie nodded, though her expression remained troubled as she left. That evening, Emma was unusually quiet during dinner. Michael had just begun to wonder if she was feeling ill when she spoke up. "Is Miss Maggie going to stop teaching me?" she asked, fork tracing patterns in her potatoes. "Why would you think that? She seemed sad today, and she hugged me extra long after our lesson." Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "I wrote her a letter. Could you give it to her?" "Of course." Michael agreed. But I'm sure Miss Maggie isn't going anywhere. Emma merely shrugged, unconvinced. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Michael contemplated his daughter's letter. Making a decision, he called Maggie. Could we talk? About today. About the center. 20 minutes later, they sat on a bench in the park near Maggie's apartment. Michael handed her Emma's letter without comment. Maggie unfolded it carefully, a small gasp escaping her as she read. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. What does it say? Michael asked quietly. Dear Miss Maggie, she read, voice wavering slightly. You are the only person who helps me hear Mom in the music. Please don't stop teaching me. I need you to show me how to play the songs in my heart like you do. Love, Emma. Silence fell between them, broken only by distant traffic and rustling leaves. I've been afraid, Maggie admitted finally. Afraid I'm not qualified. Afraid of failing. Afraid of stepping into something so much bigger than teaching individual lessons. I understand fear, Michael said. After Claire died, I was terrified of failing Emma, of not being enough. I still am, some days. But you keep trying. Yes. He turned to face her directly. Not because I'm certain I'm doing everything right, but because she needs me to try. Just like those children need someone who understands both music and loss. Someone like you. Maggie refolded Emma's letter, running her thumb over the creases. I can't do it alone. You won't have to, Michael promised. I'll be there. We'll build the right team. Maggie took a deep breath. Okay. Not for you. Not even for me. For Emma and Tyler and all the children who need what music gave them back. Michael resisted the urge to embrace her, settling for a grateful smile that conveyed more than words. In that moment of commitment, something shifted between them, a partnership forming around a shared vision that transcended their individual journeys through grief. 6 months later, Harmony and Hope Center for Musical Expression opened its doors in a renovated building in Brooklyn. Maggie, as artistic director, had assembled a small team of instructors, some with formal credentials in music therapy, others with personal experience of loss and a gift for teaching. The center offered individual lessons, group classes, and unstructured time for musical exploration. A sliding fee scale, heavily subsidized by the Harrison Foundation, ensured no child was turned away due to financial constraints. On opening day, Emma and Tyler performed the first official duet in the small recital hall, a piece they had composed together with Maggie's guidance, inspired by memories of their lost parents. Michael sat in the front row, watching his daughter with pride and bittersweet joy. Emma had blossomed in these months. Her progress on piano matched by growing confidence in other areas of life. She spoke of Claire more freely now, integrating memories of her mother into her present, rather than keeping them sealed away as too painful to touch. After the performance, as other families explored the center, Michael found Maggie in her office, organizing sheet music for the next day's first official classes. You did it, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Look at this place. Maggie smiled, her exhaustion evident but overshadowed by satisfaction. We did it. I couldn't have done this without you, Michael. Not just the funding, everything. I think Claire would have loved this place, he said softly. I think so too, Maggie agreed. Emma says she feels closer to her mother when she plays. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Keeping those connections alive through music. Michael nodded, momentarily unable to speak past the emotion tightening his throat. In the months they'd worked to bring this center to life, their relationship had deepened into something neither had named but both treasured, a partnership built on shared purpose and mutual respect that was slowly, cautiously, becoming something more. Each week, he attended Emma's lessons, often staying to help with administrative tasks or share quiet dinners with Maggie while the children did homework. They moved carefully around the growing attraction between them, aware of complex dynamics and watchful young eyes. But in moments like this, standing together in the space they'd created from shared vision, the boundaries between professional collaboration and personal connection blurred. Michael found himself reaching for her hand, a gesture that had become increasingly natural. "Thank you for showing Emma and me how to keep music in our lives, even when it hurt to hear it." Maggie's fingers tightened around his. "That's the thing about music. It can express what we feel, even when we don't have words. Even the painful parts." From the recital hall came children's laughter, pulling them back to the present. They moved toward the door together, still holding hands until the last possible moment before rejoining the celebration. No declarations had been made, no promises exchanged beyond their commitment to the center and the children it served. But in the melody of their gradually intertwining lives, a new composition was taking shape. One neither had anticipated, but both had begun to cherish. 1 year later, Harmony and Hope celebrated its anniversary with a special concert featuring students who had found their voices through the center's programs. The recital hall was filled with families, supporters, and representatives from arts organizations across the city. Emma, now 8, had grown taller and more confident. She sat at the grand piano, Tyler beside her, as they prepared to perform the centerpiece of the evening. A duet they had composed with guidance from Maggie and other instructors. In the front row, Michael watched with undisguised pride. Beside him sat Maggie, elegant in a simple blue dress, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The piece they played told a story without words, beginning with tentative notes that gradually intertwined into a conversation between instruments, building to a resolute, hopeful conclusion. Many in the audience wiped away tears at the emotional journey expressed through these children's music. When the final notes faded, applause was immediate and sustained. Emma and Tyler bowed, their faces alight with creative joy and shared accomplishment. Maggie rose to join them on stage. As artistic director, she would speak about the center's first year and its vision for the future. Harmony and Hope began as a simple idea, she told the audience, her voice steady and confident. A place where children experiencing loss could find expression through music. What we've discovered is that music doesn't just provide comfort, it creates community. As she spoke of the center's programs, her gaze drifted to Michael. Though she didn't mention him by name, the look they shared conveyed a depth of connection grown through their shared mission. "Our students don't just learn notes and rhythms," she continued. "They learn that grief doesn't have to be a solo performance. That harmony can emerge from discord. That hope can be found in creating beauty from pain." When Maggie finished, Emma stepped forward to the microphone. Though Michael hadn't known she would speak, he recognized the determination in his daughter's expression, the same look Claire had worn when certain about something important. "My mom died when I was 4, Emma began, her clear voice carrying through the hall. "I didn't remember much about her, and it made me sad all the time. My dad tried to help, but he was sad too." Michael felt a lump form in his throat as Emma continued. "Miss Maggie taught me that I could find my mom in music. Not just the songs she wrote, but in how music makes me feel things I can't say with words." Emma glanced at Maggie, with obvious affection. "Miss, Maggie doesn't try to replace my mom, but she showed me that Mom is still with me every time I play the piano." As Emma returned to her seat, Maggie's eyes met Michael's across the space between stage and audience. In that look was a year's worth of shared moments, quiet dinners, long conversations about music and grief and healing, the gradual evolution of colleagues into friends, into something neither had been ready to name, but both had come to cherish. They hadn't rushed this delicate new composition between them. Both understood too well the complexity of blending families marked by loss, the responsibility of guiding children through such transitions. They had moved with deliberate care, allowing Emma and Tyler to set much of the tempo for their growing closeness. Later, as the crowd thinned and staff began cleanup, Michael found Maggie in her office, sitting quietly at her desk with a distant expression. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" She smiled, tired but content. "Just processing. It's been quite a year, hasn't it?" "That it has." He sat across from her, the position reminiscent of their first serious conversation when he'd proposed the center. Emma's speech was unexpected. "She wrote it herself," Maggie confirmed. "Asked me not to tell you. She wanted it to be a surprise. It was. A good one. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had become natural between them. A space where unspoken understanding flowed as easily as conversation. "You know," Maggie said finally, "when your assistant called me that first day, sending me to the wrong address, I was so upset. I needed that job so badly." Michael chuckled. "And I was so annoyed that you weren't the prestigious professor I'd researched." "Funny how the universe works sometimes," Maggie observed. "One scheduling error changed everything." "Not just the error," Michael corrected gently. "What you did with it. How you connected with Emma when no one else could." Outside her office window, Brooklyn lights twinkled against the evening sky. Within the center, the last families were gathering their belongings. Michael rose, offering his hand to Maggie. "Should we round up our children? Dinner at my place?" Maggie accepted his hand. "Our usual Sunday tradition, just a few days early?" "I was thinking," Michael said, not releasing her hand, "that maybe it doesn't have to be just Sundays anymore." The implication hung between them, not a declaration or proposal, but an opening. An invitation to explore what might come next in the composition they'd been creating together. Maggie's smile was warm, her fingers tightening around his. "I think Emma and Tyler would like that." "And you?" Michael asked softly. "I think," Maggie replied, "that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected beginnings." Together, they walked out into the main hall where Emma and Tyler waited. Tired, but happy, after their successful performance. No formal announcements were made. No definitions given to what was growing between them. But as the four left the building together, there was a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place, in a composition still being written. The center stood behind them. A testament to healing through music and ahead. A future where new harmonies waited to be discovered, one note at a time.